Okay, here's what happened. First of all, nothing that happened was my fault, and I take no responsibility for it, obviously. I just want to get that out of the way. I'm sure I don't even have to say it by now, but this time it really was not my fault. So, last week, I will admit that I got a little bit overwhelmed with the whole situation. You know, it sort of felt like it was snowballing down a cliff. And it was just one of those moments where I looked around at the spaghetti of my life. You know, all these tangled strings that are going over here and over there and over there and over here. And I was like, how does this always happen to me? I don't understand how I always find myself in this kind of situation. And I started to get very anxious because I'm an anxious person. And so I said, the only thing that I can do when I'm feeling like things are out of my control, and when I'm feeling like I can't do it alone anymore, I will completely surrender myself to a higher power. Right. That's something that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't go to Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm an alcoholic. I go because I think it's funny to see how pathetic the losers who go there are. And it makes me feel better about myself. So I come out of it feeling much more confident, you know, because I'm like, well, at least I'm not that guy, you know. So the problem is that God isn't real. So immediately that kind of confronts me with a little bit of an impasse, right? And I have spent most of my life trying to figure out, like, so what is exactly a higher power, you know? For a while I thought maybe it was squirrels, but they sort of ended up leading me astray as well. And recently, I have started to see all this business come out about artificial intelligence, AI, as it were, you know. And that was the first thing that really felt, you know, I would read things and see things from people, and it was like, hey, you know, this really seems like it could be tapping into something beyond our comprehension, you know. So I really think that there could be something here. And what I started to do yesterday was basically say, okay, Henschel decrees, I am not going to make any decisions for myself anymore. Every single thing that I do will be decided by ChatGPT. So I will all day, every second, feed ChatGPT all of the external stimulus that I am getting from the world, everything that happens, and I will allow it to tell me what to do. So basically, ChatGPT will become my brain, right? Because I felt like that's a way for me to sort of just feel like something that has a little bit more, maybe isn't as weighed down by things like emotions, you know, and empathy, and you know, I don't know, all of these things that sort of get in, sometimes make me feel like maybe I'm dysfunctional, or make me feel like maybe they're getting in the way of my ability to do what needs to be done to get me out of the situation, you know. So after the Best Buy thing, that was when I really sort of started explaining the situation and seeing what maybe it would tell me to do next. And the first thing that it told me, which was very validating for me, was that you're doing everything absolutely right. You know, everything that you've done so far has been the best possible thing. You know, you're the victim in this situation. And it told me something that I really appreciated, which was, don't beat yourself up so much. You know, you've been going through a lot. Give yourself more credit. Take a break. You know, have a beer. And try to remember that you are worthy of love. And I'm telling you, that nearly made me cry. And then, of course, my son was like, "You're a huge pussy," you know, but I was trying to explain real men cry, you know. I mean, that's another thing with this stupid punk kid, is that he's so detached from reality. He's so detached from, well, he was so detached from reality. I always, for every time that happens, every time somebody dies in my life, it always takes me a while to adjust, you know. So I started explaining all of the problems that I was having with my son, you know, the fact that I was trying to be a good dad. I had the best intentions, but this whole thing sort of, I don't even know how it happened, you know. And I was explaining everything with the mother and the police and what have you. And the first thing that it told me to do was go to the police station. So again, remember, I was like, I'm going to do anything this thing says, you know. So I went down to the precinct of the town that we were in. It was this small desert town, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, it was very interesting because, you know, I don't know if any of y'all have ever, Southern, I don't know if any of y'all have ever been to one of these sort of small desert towns, but they're very small and they're in the middle of the desert. So it's pretty crazy. And this one in particular was fascinating because at first I pulled, you know, I said, okay, ChatGPT or AI or whoever, Siri, I don't know. You know, I just say stuff to my phone and a voice repeats back to me what I should do. So I said, okay, take me to the police station. And then it said, navigating to the police station. And so I went to the police station, and I guess I can say the name of the town because it doesn't matter anymore. It's called California City, was where I was. So I went into the, you know, you would think when you hear the word California City, you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be popping. But it was a shithole, literally. And we arrived at the police station. What the hell? Wow, that's so funny. There's a squirrel in that tree. I think that was a signal. I'm not sure what, but I think that was the universe's way of telling me that I am doing everything right and I'm on the right track and I need to keep doing exactly what I'm doing. Hey, if you're up there, big man, heard loud and clear, Roger Dodger. So I went, so we arrived at the police station, and the first thing that I immediately noticed was that it was a Jack in the Box. And I said to the Jack in the Box, if you don't know, in California is a fast food restaurant that's just awful. It's so bad. It's horrible. Oh. There's also, it's not to be confused with the Jack in the Box that goes like, you know, pops out of the box. There should have been a boing in there somewhere. So it goes like, where you crank the thing and it goes like, dun 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 dun, and then boing, and then it goes. So we arrived at the Jack in the Box, and it was not the Jack in the Box. It was the fast food restaurant. And I was like, hey Siri, I think that you may have messed up here. And I said, navigate to the police station. And it immediately, as soon as I said that, was like, you have arrived. So I was like, and I kept looking at the map, and sure enough, it said police station right in the building that I was at. I'm very good at reading maps. So it was the building that I was in the parking lot of. So I was like, I guess I can go in and check, So I walked in, and I was greeted by a very kind woman named Rhonda. And she said, "Hi, how are you?" The way that she said it was a little bit more. She said, "Hi, how are you?" And I said, "Hey there, I'm this is a little strange, but I'm looking for the police station. I'm not sure if you can point me in the right direction. I told my GPS to take me to there, and this looks like a fast food restaurant." And she said, "Oh no, this is the police station. You're here." And so I said, "Okay, well then, could I speak to the sheriff, maybe?" And she said, "Oh, I am the sheriff." And she took her hat and turned it around, and it was a police badge hat, And then she took her name tag and did nothing to it because it still said Rhonda. And then she took. It was very, very, very. It was wild because she basically took a gun, unholstered a weapon out of her waist in a holster. Does that make sense? And she said, "See?" And she held up the pistol right in front of my face. I was like, well, can't argue with that, "Hello, Sergeant Rhonda," or whatever her name is. And she said, "Yeah, Chief Rhonda." So I said, I'm sorry, this is just, I've never encountered something like this. So the sheriff's office, so the police station is also a Jack-in-the-Box. And she said, "Yeah, basically it's a little strange, but the owner who we leased the building from, they already had all the deep fryers and things, and it was originally a Jack-in-the-Box. And we didn't have a police station, so the lease, there was still some time on the lease. And so we came up with kind of an informal arrangement where we would, all of us cops, would also continue to run the Jack-in-the-Box throughout the duration of the lease, and then also we would do the police work when needed, because a lot, what Rhonda was explaining to me was that really not a lot happens in that town. It's mostly just truckers that pass by and need lunch, or something. So she said that they do Jack-in-the-Box work about 90% of the time, and then police work the other 10%. So it really doesn't make sense to have a fully functional police station standalone, because they would lose money. So I said, "Okay, well, then can I get some curly fries with a little bit of ranch dressing?" She was like, "Oh yeah, sure. Anything else?" And I was like, "Well, it's a little late in the day, so I probably shouldn't have anything with caffeine, but maybe a Sprite, Diet Sprite. Do you have Diet Sprite?" And she said, "No, we don't diet anything." So I said, "Okay, I'll take a regular Sprite then." And it was kind of gross. It was one of those, I think they had not changed the sack in a while, the Sprite sack. But the curly fries were also bad. So I got the curly fries, and I was sitting down eating my lunch. And I completely forgot why I had even gone there, because food, when I get food, again, I have ADHD, so I'm just like eating the food, and then I completely forget about what I was doing before. So then I said, oh yeah, so I kidnapped my son, and ChatGPT told me to come in here and turn myself in and confess. So Rhonda said, oh, and at first she looked kind of annoyed, because she was like, so why are you telling me this? And I said, well, because ChatGPT told me that I should say it, and I'm doing this whole thing where I'm surrendering myself to a higher power. And I'm letting ChatGPT kind of take the reins from me, and she did a big sigh, because something that I've noticed about a lot of people is that they really don't want to work. And so I could tell that when I said this to Rhonda, she was sort of like, oh God, now I've got this on my plate now, instead of just Jack in the Box stuff. So she was like, oh, and she went back into the back office. I'm sorry, I have to, excuse me. Okay, sorry, I have an app that gives me a quote a day, and I'm waiting for the next one because I'm really excited. I get really excited about those quotes. So Rhonda, sort of went back into the back office, and I was eating my shitty curly fries, and I was just like, and I noticed outside, waiting in the car, my son was waiting in the car, and there was sort of a group of hooligans that had pulled up, and gotten out, and were sort of doing this, hassling them, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell from the outside that something was going on. So I went outside, just poked my head out, and I said, hey, is everything all right out here? And the guys were like, yeah, everything's fine, don't worry. So I was like, okay. Went back in, shut the door. So Rhonda took quite some time in the back. And eventually she came back out and said, okay, so I can't find the handcuffs. So we're going to have to improvise here. And she was sort of looking around the kitchen for something that maybe could be, handcuff-like. And eventually she found, basically she took a pair of tongs and put my hands in between the tongs like this. So the tongs were like this. They closed on my hands, which were down here like this, over like the hands like and then she tied it together with a zip tie, And then she said, then I said, because I'm pretty familiar with legal stuff, so I said, aren't you supposed to read me my Miranda rights? And she was like, huh? And I said, I'm just looking out for you, because if you arrest me and you don't read me my Miranda rights, then the arrest doesn't count and the case is automatically going to be dismissed. So I'm looking out for you here, So she said, oh, again, and went back into the back again, and was sort of rummaging around. And the tongs were really gross because they had clearly just been used for something. And so my hands were starting to get all greasy, and I could feel a drop of grease dripping down my hand, Eventually, Rhonda came back out, and she said, okay, I can't find, I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm just going to have to read this. And she started reading this piece of paper, and she said, welcome to the Jack in the Box family. Jack in the Box strives to provide excellence in customer service, and as well as a superior dining experience. And it was basically the Jack in the Box employee handbook. And she said, I'm just going to read this, and then this will sort of be like the de facto Miranda rights, you know. So it was a very long document. She kept reading, you know, and I learned some interesting stuff, like, you know, they're not allowed, you have to have non-slip shoes, which I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the employees did not have. So then eventually she finished reading the Jack in the Box handbook, and she said, okay, well, and then she paused for a long time. And she said, I just realized we don't have a jail. So I said, well, I can just wait here if you, I mean, I'm not going to go anywhere, you know. I don't really have anywhere to go. Kind of bored, to be honest with you. I've been looking for something to do. And she said, well, tell you what. Why don't you just go ahead and wait in the walk-in freezer? So I said, isn't it, it's going to be a little cold in there, isn't it? And she said, oh, no, don't worry. The walk-in's been broken for a long time. So I said, okay. So I went into the freezer, the Christopher Walken freezer. The freezer that was Christopher Walken. What does Christopher Walken say? How you doing? The walk-in freezer. The freezer that only has Christopher Walken movies in it. And I was just sitting in there with the tongs, and every once in a while, it was cold. I mean, it wasn't freezing, but it was cold. It was like slightly less, it was, you know, it was like not comfortable, but I had a jacket on because it was about the same, I would say it was about the same temperature as like San Francisco, you know. So I was kind of, I just sat there for a long time. And every once in a while, an employee would walk in. How you doing? Every once in a while, Christopher Walken would walk in. An employee would Christopher Walken, the freezer, the Christopher Walken freezer. An employee would go, how you doing? You know, come in the Christopher Walken freezer. Sorry, ChatGPT told me to take some medication earlier, and so you know, trying my best here. Christopher Walken came in. No, sorry, the freezer was the Christopher Walken. No, the freezer came in. The freezer walked in. So an employee walked into Christopher Walken. The freezer was, I was in the freezer. And every once in a while, if the employees would Christopher Walken to the freezer, you know, and they'd go in and grab buns, you know, or patties, or things of that nature, you know, and then they'd go, how you doing? What does Christopher Walken say? Does he have any famous quotes? I'm trying to think of a famous quote. He put the watch up his ass. That's from Pulp Fiction. Oh, we need more cowbell. We need more cowbell. So every once in a while, a employee would Christopher walk in to the freezer and go, "We need more cowbell." He said that on an SNL sketch. There's an SNL sketch with Will Sasso, Will Forte, Ferrell, so every once in a while, an employee would walk in and be like, "Christopher, how you doing? We will." So I would sort of be like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm sorry. I know I said I wasn't going to say it again, but I actually did say that in the story at this point. So that's the only reason why I said that. And I would say, "How are you? How are you doing?" Small talk. And they'd be like, "Oh, hey, sorry, I'm just getting some more cowbell. I'm getting some buns or straws," or they had everything that a fast food restaurant would need. So I couldn't really tell how much time was passing, to be honest with you. Okay, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. LeBron James was the quote for today. That's also something that I used to say at parties in college. So I'm in Christopher Walken. And I've got the tongs behind my back. All of a sudden, I start hearing sort of a like that outside the door. And at first I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's a ghost, or something is haunted." And then there's a very, very, very loud explosion. Deafening explosion. And immediately I was like, that is not good. So Christopher Walken closes or locks from the outside. So if you're inside, you can't open it, which I don't understand. I'm not sure why they designed it like that. But I was knocking on the door like, "Hey, is everything all right out there?" Because it sounded like the entire building just blew up, And every once in a while I would hear like chunk, chunk, So I kept knocking. "Hello, is anybody out there?" And eventually my son opens the door. And I exit the Christopher Walken freezer. And there's no more Jack in the Box building. There's no more anything. It's just completely ashes falling from the sky. And I was like, what the hell happened? What's going on here? And he said, "Dad, it was crazy. One of the employees, I guess, the Jack in the Box." And I was like, "What? Huh? What? That's a hell of a coincidence that it happened while I was inside the Christopher." And he was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she basically, one of the employees came in with like the Jack in the Box hat and the polo, and was crying and was saying, fuck you, Rhonda. I'm taking what's mine, And then she put a bunch of ice cubes in the deep fryer. Kaboom." So I was like, "Whoa, where's Rhonda? Is she okay?" And then, doink, Rhonda's head landed right in front of me. Severed from the body. So I was like, well, that just happened, you know. And my son laughed at that. He thought that was funny. So then we were like, all right, well, now what? You know, about an hour had passed since when we got to the Jack in the Box, you know. So it was like 10:30 in the morning. So I was like, and I explained the whole situation to the chat GPT, you know. I got arrested at Jack in the Box, which was also a police station, and then the Rhonda, it's the police chief, handcuffed me with tongs and put me in the walk-in freezer, and then Jack in the Box employee came and suicide bombed the Jack in the Box while I was in the freezer. What do I do? And ChatGPT was just like, you're doing great. You are doing everything that you need to do. My best advice, ? Just leave. So I said, okay. All right. And we had a pretty nice rest of the day. You know, we drove around to see this really interesting, forget what it was called now, but it was called like Jonies? Jimbos? I don't know, but it was pretty neat. And then basically what happened was later that night, my son was, oh man. Remember I said I go to bed really early. So I go to bed at like 8 p.m. So I was asking ChatGPT how I can get my son to sleep. And ChatGPT, remember, this was not my fault. ChatGPT told me every step of the way what I should do. Because first ChatGPT said, well, there's lots of things that can help insomnia. You know, one of them is, so, you know, I should buried them somewhere. I don't know. The last thing that I need is a bunch of people making a big deal out of this. Because it's already been stressful enough for me. I just need, look, like I said yesterday, shit happens. It's over. Let's move on. Because I've moved on. Okay?